Where are the men? Where are the men in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? One of the most fundamental, one of the most basic characteristics of godly masculinity is the willingness to defend and protect children from harm and violent predators. Now, some people might argue that this should be an expected characteristic in any civilized society, regardless of religious persuasion, but it most certainly should be true for men who are professed followers of Christ, which by definition places such an enormous value and premium on the well-being and the care of children, the protection of little boys and girls. That is a value. It is an ethic so intrinsic, so woven into the very fabric of the Abrahamic monotheistic Christian religion that it is impossible to separate from one's faith. This is especially true for deliberately torturing and violently taking a child's life, because if there is no right to life, then religious liberty is an impossibility. Yet amazingly, shockingly, disturbingly, leaders of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, my church, have deliberately and willfully taught and perpetuated the barbaric lie that violently attacking and taking the life of little children is a sacred right that should be tolerated. When Adventist leadership say that this horror should be tolerated, this is not merely a submission to a falsehood, but it is at the same time a denial and attack upon the most fundamental characteristic of godly masculinity. What is astounding about this is that we see no godly masculine pushback against this, almost nothing at all. It's just mind-blowing. Where are the men? When I first learned about the church's support for murder, I immediately started contacting men evangelists, speakers, and church leaders. I have for many years, probably just like many of you watching this video, I have admired what I thought were very courageous, bold, masculine men who I thought were committed to Christ, and to my utter shock and horror was met with the most pathetic, cowardly responses. Andrew, I'm not called to talk about this. Andrew, now's not a good time to say anything. Andrew, if I say something, they might think I'm getting political. Now, when I first started getting these responses, I was like, what? No, this can't be true. Maybe there's some type of glitch in the matrix or something. So I kept asking, and I continued to get the same pathetic responses. We have a very serious problem because we have no men, no godly masculinity. Our church leadership willfully and openly and even publicly flaunt their open support for and even honor violent predators, and there is no masculine pushback. The name of Christ and His church is being put to an open shame, and no masculine calls for repentance, no masculine voices calling for this wrong to be righted, and what's worse, if you dare speak against this abomination, then you will be the one condemned. Right now in the Adventist Church, if you exercise the most basic, fundamental characteristic of godly masculinity and assert the right of little children not to be murdered, then you will be the one who is treated with scorn and contempt. You will be labeled as the enemy. The number one most fundamental, undeniable, requisite characteristic of godly masculinity is the willingness to protect little children from violence. And yet, if you act as a man in the Adventist Church, you will be met with hostility and scorn through intimidation and lies. This attitude has gone on for so long, for so many decades, that now people accept this as normal, as the way things are and the way things should be. In the 1970s, the Adventists in North America and the GC wanted abortion on demand in order to make money. But knowing that church members would not accept this, they kept it a secret. This is a historical fact documented in our own church journals. In the 1980s, when international press like the Washington Post blew the lid off these secrets, church leaders became creative and began to claim that abortion was a religious liberty. You see, leaders are not stupid. They know that they can't just come out and tell the men in the church to sit down and shut up. That's not going to go over so well. So what they can't say directly, they try to do indirectly. By claiming, without any evidence, that abortion is a religious liberty, they have succeeded in instilling within the Adventist mind that the very act of defending children is itself a violation of religious liberty, that only bad people and apostates oppose abortion, and in doing so have led men to believe that exercising the most fundamental characteristic of godly masculinity is itself a wrong. By definition, current Adventism is hostile towards healthy and godly masculinity. They are not bold enough to tell you to sit down and shut up, so they cloak it in theological language and manipulation to effectively bring about the same result, which is 30 plus years of Adventist men sitting down and shutting up. The purpose of this video is to demonstrate that abortion is not just about children. It's not just about the government or the Bible. No, abortion by its very existence is a direct challenge to men, because if you sit by silently and tolerate this evil, especially within your own church, then you have violated and transgressed the most fundamental expected characteristic of a follower of Christ. If you accept the premise that the right to life can be denied at will, and especially in the most brutal, violent, bloody, and barbaric act of dismemberment, limb by limb, while the little boy or girl is still alive, then you literally have no moral authority or standing to preach any other message at any other time. And just in case this isn't clear enough, anyone, and I mean anyone, in the Adventist church who justifies or excuses or supports this crime is a savage and a murderer. Those people in our church who have the audacity to stand in the sacred pulpit and claim that abortion is a matter of freedom of conscience, these people are doing the very work of demons, and they need to be met with a strong, godly, masculine response of men who care more about God than for the perversion of these insane criminals. Our church has been inundated and poisoned so long with the support for child murder that people actually sit there in the pew and think that this is something that we need to tolerate. No, go watch the videos in the links below of an abortion being performed. Go look at the pictures of the little children who have had their arms ripped off and their legs torn apart. Go look at the pictures of the little boys with their face ripped off and the little girls who've had their genitals torn out with steel pliers. This is raw, bloody, barbaric murder, and I don't care if your favorite conservative speaker stands there on the Sabbath in a nice suit and in his nice voice and says this is a matter of conscience. He is a liar, and I will not sit here like some pathetic, spineless jellyfish and just accept it because the other jellyfish don't like it. No, the church desperately needs men to assert their godly masculinity and challenge this abomination. Now, I personally, on many separate occasions, have had the opportunity to meet church leaders from the conference union up to the division and the GC in person. And when I challenge them on abortion in person, every single time they get very weak and give pathetic, wimpy excuses. And every time I challenge them, you can just tell by looking at their face and body language that they've never been challenged before. These people literally go around from church to church, from different region to different region, always speaking and lecturing, and nobody ever challenges them or even questions them. They literally defend brutality and violence towards little boys and girls, and nobody will say anything. But when they do meet a man who will challenge them, they get nervous, they get really weak, they can't handle it. Through this gross perversion and lie that murder is religious liberty, men in our church have been taught to be just docile slugs who sit there in the pew and say nothing. But if you recognize your God-given nobility and dignity as a man who follows Christ and begin to say something, then those people will start to lose it. The number one, most urgent, most important action of men right now in the Adventist church is to fearlessly and boldly and aggressively, highlight the word aggressively, challenge this falsehood. And I mean aggressive. Do not submit like some pathetic slug for these gay and wimpy and disgusting excuses. Adventism right now is hostile towards godly masculinity, and there exists an immediate and urgent need to reclaim this lost ground. And the good news is that it's not difficult. You simply make yourself familiar with the situation and history, and then make a decision to question and challenge this falsehood at every opportunity, and then act upon it. Church leaders need to know that this falsehood will not be tolerated. Furthermore, the war against masculinity taking place in a much broader, much larger cultural context, especially in Western nations, I believe a holistic, healthy, Bible-centered, Christ-centered Adventist theology has tremendous potential to push back and offer comprehensive and helpful solutions that would lead men to be all that they can be, should be, and could be. Only a holistic, Bible-centered theology can help men to obtain all the dignity and honor that God intended for them to have. But it is completely absurd. It is completely absurd to believe that we as a church can offer a message of restoration while we simultaneously not only take a violent posture towards children, but also a hostile posture towards those who would defend them. And this is completely and absolutely insane. It is extreme insanity. Not only are we forfeiting tremendous potential to be a real force for good in the world, but denying and attacking the most basic characteristic of godly masculinity. This overflows and, like a metastasizing cancer, infects everything else. Men all over the world, in every nation, every language, and in every culture, I believe, should be able to look at the Adventist church as offering a message that attracts them to Christ. They should be able to see the glory of Christ, not a bunch of psychopaths who honor violent predators like Edward Allred, who stand in the pulpit and say that, oh, don't look at porn, but murdering children is freedom. That is retarded. Christ said, I will make you fishers of men. He did not say, I will turn you into a bunch of spineless, cowardly, pathetic jellyfish that whine and snivel when Andrew makes another video. When Paul wrote to Titus, he warned him of false teachers within the church and told him that their mouths must be stopped. They need to shut their mouth. And so Paul said it was necessary to rebuke them sharply. He didn't say, be a submissive wet noodle and just try to foster a climate of discussion. No, he said rebuke them severely. And if this does not apply to the situation today of violence towards children, then what in the world does? Again, the most urgent, the most important action of men right now in the Adventist church is to boldly and aggressively, and I mean aggressively, challenge this falsehood. There's a lot more that can be said, of course, but that's enough for this video. Thanks for watching.